Hey everyone, thanks for watching Bridgeport's Brightest Lights. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use these awesome pea stakes in your light show. So let's get right into the video. So I'm out here in the garage, and before I take you outside to show you how all of the pea stakes work, I wanted to go over the many different options you can use to build them and to set them up to get them to work, because there are a lot of options. There's different options for the pixels, there's different options for holding the pea stakes up, different options for mounting them into the ground, tons of different options, and I'll be explaining which ones I use and which ones I think are the best. I'll also be going into X-Lights later on in the video to show you how to program them and use different designs and effects on them to make them look awesome. And then if you stick around all the way to the end of the video, I'll have a few clips of what they look like in our show, just to convince you to buy them even more if you haven't already. But before I get into any of that, I want to explain what pea stakes are, who invented them, and how they work. Now, the pea stake was invented by a guy named David Peace. That's how it got its name, pea stake. He made a whole video explaining why and how he made them with his design, and I'll link that somewhere on the screen. It should pop up over here somewhere. So full credit goes to him for the pea stakes. They are not my idea, and none of this was my idea. Now, I don't actually have any strands of pea stake lights because they're all outside in the yard right now, but I might have a few pictures show up on the screen of what they look like. Basically, pea stakes are just a strand of 5 to 10 lights mounted on a stake facing your audience, and then you have a lot of these stakes spread out in your yard. Then you can put different designs on them, making the pixels go up and down, and it creates this awesome bouncing effect, making it look like the whole yard is moving. Now, that's what a pea stake is, and like I said, full credit goes to David Peace. I did not create any of this. Now on to the different ways you can buy the pea stakes, and I'm going to be starting out on how you can buy the pixels. First, you can buy them at a single stake at a time, so it would have about 2 to 3 feet of wire with a male pigtail on it, then 5 to 10 lights depending on how many you want in your pea stake, and then a female pigtail at the end. And then if you want, let's say 100 pea stakes, you'll have to buy 100 of those. You can also buy them in strands with lots of pea stakes on them. I've seen some with around 5 to 10 pea stakes on them. You might be able to find others with even more pea stakes on them. It has about 3 feet of wire with a male pigtail on it, then a pea stake, then 3 foot of wire in between, then another pea stake, and it goes all the way on to the end of the strand. That way is usually cheaper for buying the pixels because you kind of buy them in bulk with lots of pea stakes on one strand instead of buying one pea stake at a time. The final way you could do it, and this is the hard way, you could just make it yourself by buying regular pixels and then cutting a number off for the pea stakes and then soldering wire in between all of them. But I don't recommend that idea at all because there'll be a lot of soldering connections, a lot of spots where things could go wrong. That's why different pixel vendors made their own pea stake with wires on it, and it just saves you tons of time. Now, here are all the places you can buy pea stakes from already made. All the links to all these websites I'll have in the description, but the place I bought mine off of were Ray Rouge store. Now, if you don't know what Ray Rouge store is, it's basically a store that sells tons of different pixel props and everything like that. They're out of China, and you might be thinking that's not the best, but I'll promise you they actually have very good quality pixels. You'll just have to wait a little bit longer than if you were to buy them from other stores in the United States or anywhere else. I found that he had the cheapest lights, and I thought that his design was the best to use. I bought the ones that had a strand of 10 stakes with 3 foot wire in between and 5 pixels on each stake. I'm not sure of the exact cost that it was. I think it has gone up a little bit though. I'll leave a link in the description of the exact ones I bought. I also know Wired Watts sells them. They only sell one pea stake at a time though. Wally's Lights have sold them. I'm not sure if they still do or if they sell a single pea stake or lots of them at a time. I just know that they have sold them before. Now I'm going to move on to the different mounting options. There are many different ways you can mount pea stakes. David Peace did a whole video about the different vendors that sell pea stakes and all their mounting options, and I'll put that video on the screen right now. But if you don't want to go to that, I know Biscorio has a design. It looks like this. They have slots you slide the pixels into, and then you put a stake into the back of it and stake it into your yard. Wizard of Wire, I think, sells different options too, where it's just a stake and you mount the pixels onto it. And then Holiday Coro sells a mounting option too that I'll show you in a minute because that's the one I used. I think there might be some other mounting options, but like I said, just go check out the video from David Peace, and he has all of them shown, put together, and how they work. But the way I mount my pea stakes is with this Coro right here. This is from Holiday Coro, like I said, and I did a video about this where I unboxed this. This is meant if you want to have one long piece stake. You can have a piece stake that's this long if you want to. There's a total of 50 holes on here, so if you want 1 inch spacing, you could put 50 pixels in here. But the good thing about this is you don't have to use it as one long one. If you look, there are slits that go all the way down here where you can cut the coral at. There's one at the bottom and one at the top. You can cut one of these into 5 different sections, and then you can fit 5 pixels in here with 2 inch spacing, or 10 pixels in each section with 1 inch spacing. And then this will give you about the same height and the closest original design as what David Peace uses. So you punch the pixels into the back right here, and the pixels will show out from the front. And then if you notice, there's these big holes right here. So you can use these to have the wire come out of the piece stake. And then once you have all the pixels in here, you fold it into a triangle. So it looks like this. There are these slots on the side. You can put zip ties in around here, zip tie it, and then you can slide it over some sort of pipe. What we did is we took wooden dowels, slid it down in there, and then zip tied to the wooden dowel and around here so this stays shut, and I'll show that in just a second. Now, this is the only design I bought before. I haven't bought any other design, so I can't say this is the best without trying them. But I will say I really do like this. Each of these cost $7.49 at the time I bought these on Holiday Coral. They are very sturdy and strong. It actually takes a lot of effort to cut these. And since we had to cut out 70, it was very hard to do it by hand. So my dad got his saw out, and we just used a saw to cut these, and they actually had no problems. Now, one tip I do have if you use the saw idea is flip your saw blade around so it's backwards. That way it doesn't tear through this and ruin it. And as you can see in this video, this is with the saw blade backwards. The stakes look perfectly fine when they're cut. So that's our design for the piece stakes. And now I think it's time we go outside to take a look at what they look like. So here's all of our piece stakes out in the yard. And before I get started out here, I'm sorry if the video is very choppy. There's a lot of cars going by and I want to cut them out so they don't sound that loud. But as you see, we have the coral, and then we have the wooden dowel in there, like I said. Then we have the 5 pixels with about 3 feet of wire in between them. And we have 4 rows of these, and there are a different number of pixels in each. There's a row of 16, a row of 17, and then 2 rows of 18. I was gonna try and make them more equal, but I messed up a little bit and didn't want to change them. Now, if you look from the side of them, you'll notice none of these are straight at all in their rows. And if you look at them from the front, they are also not straight. But that is the point, because if you have all of the piece stakes in a line, the back ones will not be visible and it will be harder to see in most situations. Now, in our situation, I'm not sure how well you can tell in the video, but we have a slight slope going up here. So the back ones are still very visible, but I still made them random just so you could see them pretty well, and I'd recommend you do that too. Now I'm gonna show you the design of one of these by themselves. You'll notice if you look at them from the front, we do not have the stakes sitting on the ground, and that's because when the light show comes during Christmas time and at near the end of the year, we do get a little bit of snow. Now, we do get a lot of snow after into the new year, but during the Christmas season we don't get as much, but we still get a decent amount. So we kept them off the ground a little bit so we can get up to this much snow and the pixels won't be covered. Now, if you live in somewhere warm, you don't need to keep them off the ground like this unless you want to. You can't even tell at night that they're off the ground. But this is just so if we get snow, they're not covered and you can still see them all well. Something I forgot to mention is when you cut these, each of these are 9 inches long. And then they have 10 pixel holes. We, like I said, have the strands of 5 pixel stakes. So we did 2 inch spacing. And then you have the wire that goes on to the next stake and the next stake. I'll pull this out to show you what it looks like. We have it about this deep into the ground, and it is very strong. These wooden dowels, we bought them from Home Depot, or maybe it was Lowe's, I can't exactly remember. We bought them all in a length of 48 inches, and then we cut each one into 3 to give us 3 stakes. That gives us 16 inches, so we have the 9 inches that can go in here. We have about 3 inches or so that can go into the ground, and then we still have room for a gap that will leave it off the ground. Now, when we cut these, we were going to put a little cut on the end so that way they go into the ground easier, but we found you actually didn't have to do that if you have soft ground like we do. I pushed them in myself with my hands at first, and they were a little bit hard and my hands started to hurt. So after that, I just took a hammer and gently hammered them in, and then they all stayed in the ground well. And you could see this is very strong. Like, I'm actually using a lot of force just to wiggle it this much. The only problem that we had is they turn sometimes, but as long as you get the zip ties very tight It won't turn that often unless you get a really big gust of wind. Now what we had to do with the pixel wires in the back, I'm not sure where you can see it, but we had to bend the wires so they're inward, and so they make like 2 loops between each pixel. That way we could get the wooden dowel to fit. Then what we did is put the wooden dowel there, pinch this around here, put 1 zip tie around it so it goes on the outside through the holes, and then around here. We put 1 at the top and then we put 1 at the bottom, and this is very stable. It does not go up or down that easy. And then I'm not sure if I said this at the beginning, but we have a total of 70 stakes all spread out right here like you see. And now I'm going to talk about how they're all wired up quickly. Since you only have about 3 foot of wire in between each stake, you obviously can't spread them out that far. So I can't have a stake here, then over there, then over here, and bounce all around. They have to go in order. So what we did is, this is the middle right here, and the controller box is right there. So we have 40 stakes on one half and 30 on the other. So 3 strands on one half and 4 strands on the other. And then what we did is just zigzag them. So the wire ends here. So it went that way, and then it comes around to the second row, goes through the second row, then through the third row, and then from the 4th row, and it starts right here. And then same with this one, it goes all the way down, comes around, goes to this one, comes down, goes around all the way to the end. Now the same power injection math does not necessarily work with this, because usually you can go about 200 pixels at 12 volts until you need a power inject. But it's a little different with this, because since you have gaps of wire in between, you lose voltage, a small amount between them. So this is the 200th pixel right here, and we did have to power inject at the end of this strand. Now since this one only has 30 and this is the end of the other strand, this is the 150th pixel, we should probably power inject here, but we don't. When it's on white, there's a little bit of pink, but it's not that big of a deal, so we just left it. But you might not be able to go as far because you have more gaps of wire in between here. Now, one final note I have is, if you buy these, buy extra pixels, more than you plan on having, because if one of these lights die, you cannot replace them like a regular pixel on any of the house. And I'll show you why that is, because if you look at the pixel wire right here, and I'll zoom in a bit, you could see that there are 4 wires on there, and with most pixels there's only 3. And the reason that is because you need your power, your ground, and then you have your data that goes up, but then you also need a wire for the data to go back down so it can continue on, because it can't split the data right here. It has to go in order. So the data comes through, goes to this pixel, this pixel, this pixel, this pixel, this pixel, and then it goes and shoots it back out onto the next wire. So these are 4 wire pixels, and if one of these pixels goes dead, you cannot replace them with a 3 wire pixel, because it won't be able to send the data right. So always buy extra of these. In case one goes dead, you can replace it with another one of these pixels. However, if you do the design where you build these yourself and use regular pixels, you will be able to use a regular 3 wire pixel, because if you wire it yourself, you have the data coming here, then out at the top, down to the next one. So that is how we have them all set up out here, and now I'm going to go into Xlights to show you how we program them. So I'm here on Xlights, and now I'm going to show you how I program these and how I set them up in Xlights. Programming them is not hard at all. The hardest part is just making the models for them. This is our 3D Christmas layout, and right here is all of the stakes. So if you come to the side, you'll notice that they look almost like they do in the yard, but they're not exactly right, because it's impossible to get every piece stake in the right position. But I think this is close enough, and if it's a little bit off, it's not going to make a huge deal. So the hardest part is just putting each model out and getting them in this position. I couldn't think of any faster way to do it, and there might be a faster way, but I'm not sure of any. So what I did is I came up to create new single line, and then I just dragged it out and made 70 single lines in one position. And then I changed all the settings on it. So I set it to 1 string, I set it to 5 nodes a string, and then 1 light a node. And I set it to start at the green square because the data starts at the bottom pixel, so make sure it's set for the bottom. And then there's nothing else you just have to change. The only hard part is just trying to get it all spread out. So if you have a lot of these, it's going to be very hard. It probably took me 2 hours to put all these out, but once they're out, it's easy to program them. One other thing you should do too is make a group for all of these, because you don't want to program these individually. I have never actually programmed these individually. I program them all in a group. I have a group called All Stakes, and I put all 70 stakes in there. And then I also have a group called all stakes even and all stakes odd. Now this group is a little bit messed up because I had to come in here and redo some things, but I'll fix it later. But what this is if you're looking at the front and then you can almost pick out certain rows here, this only makes every other row light up, and then all stakes odd does all the other pixels. So that way you can make an effect where they're bouncing up and down separately. Now a few seconds ago I told you should make groups for these, and when I'm programming them I don't have all the stakes show up because it'd be a lot of scrolling to do. All I do is have the groups in here. So I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see the house because there's only this small little window I'm going to keep it in. But when I'm programming the stakes, there's two main effects that I usually use. I use the single strand effect, and then I also use the wave effect. So I put the single strand effect on all the stakes on the all stake group. And then what I do is I come to render style and I set it to per model default. Now what that does is it puts it, when it's rendering, it puts the effect on each individual stake. So now you can see it's going from left to right on the actual stakes. Now I can speed it up a little bit. Let's set it to 10 cycles. And let's make it bounce, because when you make it bounce, it looks better. Now if you look, it's making all the piece stakes bounce. This is from a top view. And if I make it from the regular road view, you can see they're bouncing all up and down. You can also speed it up a lot so it looks like it's bouncing more. You can also make the chase size bigger. So the bigger it is, it will light up more pixels. So right now only 1 pixel is on each stake, but if I make it thicker, now you can see that 2 pixels are on each stake. Now another thing this effect works good for is if you put it on a group where it's all stakes even or all stakes odd. This is going to look a little bit funny because it's not all the way set up yet because it's a little messed up. But if you make half the stakes bounce up and down in one direction and the other in the other direction, it makes this pattern where it's bouncing back and forth. Now you don't want to make it just this half doing it and just this half doing it. You want to make all the stakes random there in the different groups. And then one other thing I like to do is make one of the effects a little bit offset. And then it makes this effect where it looks like half of them are behind, and it makes it still look really cool. The other effect I use pretty often is the wave effect. Now there is a small sweet spot that you have to hit with all the settings to give off the perfect wave effect. First thing you want to do is increase the thickness of the waves. And immediately you'll be able to see that the waves are a little bit more visible. And now what you want to do is increase the scale height of the wave. That makes it look wavier, if that's the word you want to use. Also increase the number of waves so there's a lot more waves or a lot less waves. The lower the number of waves, it'll just look like it's doing the single strand effect again. I usually find that having 1 wave, maybe 2, makes it look the coolest, like this. You can also increase the speed a little bit if you want, so it looks like it's waving a lot faster, like this. So right now, like this looks really cool for a fast part of a song, and it'll make it look like the whole yard is moving. So if you want to have an effect like this, copy the settings I use and then just adjust them a little bit for your settings how you want it. These 2 effects I use the most often to give it the bouncing up and down effect, but I still use a lot of the other regular effects just to use it for regular things. Such as the butterfly effect, that makes it look really cool. I'll choose some Halloweenish colors for that. And then I'll speed it up a bit. This still makes a really cool effect. You can use almost all of these effects and it will still look normal. Now I'm going to quickly add a few more effects so the rest of the house is doing something so you can see what this will look like with the rest of the house. So I changed a few things. I put Halloween colors on the background. Obviously it wouldn't be Halloween for this layout because we have the tree and the snowflakes and stuff. But this is what it would look like with the rest of the house. And now obviously you want all the effects to look mostly the same, so you don't want a calm effect and a fast effect usually. I just add this right now so you can see what the stakes will look like with the rest of the house lit up. Now you can still program the stakes in your entire display group. So if you have a group with all of your lights, you can add the stakes in there and they'll still work fine. For example, if I put a butterfly effect in there, the stakes will still light up and look right. You can also add a fan effect, and let's change some of the settings. The stakes will still look right. One final note I do have is this is not anywhere as cool as the way David Peace programs his stakes. I know he did a bunch of things with different models and groups, and I think he made a video about it. If he did, I'll put it on the screen somewhere. You can click it and watch how he programmed them. This video is just showing how I set them up and how I program them. But that is how you can program them in Xlights. I really think Peace Stakes are an awesome prop because you not only can use them in Christmas light shows, You can also use them in Halloween light shows and maybe any other holiday light show you have. They're a great way to fill up empty space on the ground if you don't know what prop to put there, and they do make really cool designs. And now before I finish the video, I'm going to show you a quick few clips of what the Peace Stakes look like at night in our show with and without all the other lights. So that is what they look like in our light show. I really think Peace Stakes are just a super cool prop to add. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll try to respond as quickly as I can, but I am very busy now getting the Halloween light show set up and recording all that. And we are also getting ready to start setting up a Christmas light show as soon as the Halloween one ends. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.